The telegram arrived on a Tuesday morning in August 1883, informing Willa Reynolds that her father was dead and the ranch was now hers, along with debts that exceeded the property's worth by nearly $3,000. She stood on the dusty platform of the Moab, Utah train station, clutching that piece of paper in one hand and her carpetbag in the other, watching the locomotive disappear into the desert heat while wondering if she had made the worst mistake of her life by coming here. The ranch sat 15 miles outside town, nestled against the red rock cliffs that gave this part of the Utah Territory its distinctive character. Willa hired a wagon from the livery, ignoring the skeptical look the stableman gave her when she said where she was going. The journey took most of the afternoon, and with each mile, she felt the weight of what she had inherited settling onto her shoulders like the dust that coated everything in this unforgiving landscape. When she finally saw the property, her heart sank. The house was a weathered two-story structure that leaned slightly to the left, its paint long since stripped away by wind and sand. The barn was in better condition but needed repairs. Fencing sagged in multiple places, and she counted only 47 head of cattle where her father's letters had promised 200. Either he had been lying, or something had gone very wrong in the months before his death. She climbed down from the wagon and stood in the yard, trying not to cry. At 22 years old, she had left her position as a schoolteacher in St. Louis, used her entire savings to pay for the journey west, and now stood on the threshold of what looked like complete ruin. But Willa Reynolds had not come all this way to give up without trying. Her father had built this ranch from nothing 20 years ago. If he could do it then, she could save it now. The house was mostly empty except for basic furniture and a thick layer of dust. She found her father's ledgers in a desk drawer and spent the evening reading by lamplight, trying to understand what had happened. The story they told was grim. Medical expenses from an injury 2 years ago had started the downward spiral. Then a harsh winter had killed off much of the herd. Her father had borrowed money from the bank, then borrowed more when the first loan came due. The final entry was dated 3 weeks before his death, a single line that read, "Sold 90 head to Garrett. Not enough." She did not sleep well that night. The house creaked and groaned, and she kept hearing sounds outside that might have been coyotes or might have been her imagination. When dawn finally came, she was grateful for the light. Willa spent the next 3 days taking stock of everything. The cattle were scattered across several hundred acres of grazing land. The water situation was better than she had feared. A creek ran through the property year-round, fed by springs in the red rocks. The well near the house still worked. She found tools in the barn, most of them in decent condition. There was a buckboard wagon with a broken wheel, harnesses that needed mending, and a stack of lumber that had weathered but was still usable. On the 4th day, she rode into Moab to meet with the bank manager. She had found an old mare in the small pasture behind the barn, gentle and patient, perfect for someone who had limited riding experience. The banker, a portly man named Henderson, looked at her over his spectacles with barely concealed contempt. "Miss Reynolds, I am sorry for your loss, but I must be frank with you. This loan is in serious default. Your father missed the last 2 payments before he died. I have been more than patient, but the bank cannot continue to extend credit indefinitely. How much time can you give me?" Willa asked, keeping her voice steady even as her hands trembled in her lap. "The loan is due in full by the end of November. That is 3 months from now. If you cannot pay, we will have to foreclose and sell the property to recover our losses." "And how much is owed?" $3,247, including interest. It might as well have been $1 million. Willa had $17 left to her name. She thanked Henderson for his time and walked out of the bank into the bright sunlight, feeling dizzy. 3 months to come up with over $3,000 or lose everything. She stood on the wooden sidewalk, trying to think, trying to plan, trying not to panic. "You all right, miss?" Willa turned to see an older woman with kind eyes and silver hair pinned up under a simple bonnet. "I am fine, thank you. Just the heat." The woman studied her with the shrewd gaze of someone who had seen too much life to be fooled by polite lies. "You are Joshua Reynolds' daughter. I heard you had come to take over the ranch. I am Margaret Sullivan. My husband and I run the general store." "Willa Reynolds, pleased to meet you. Come have some water and get out of the sun for a moment." Margaret led her to the store, a sprawling establishment that seemed to sell everything from penny nails to ladies' hats. She poured Willa a glass of water from a clay pitcher and watched her drink it. "How bad is it?" Margaret asked quietly. Willa saw no point in lying. "Bad enough that I have 3 months to perform a miracle or lose the ranch." Margaret nodded slowly. "Your father was a good man, but he had a run of terrible luck. That injury he took when his horse threw him, it never healed right. He could not work the way he used to. Things fell apart." "I need to hire help," Willa said. "At least one man who knows cattle and can help me run the ranch. But I do not have money to pay wages until I can sell some beef. I do not suppose you know anyone who would work on credit." Margaret's expression was sympathetic, but not hopeful. "Most of the good hands around here are already working for the big outfits. The rest would not work for a woman, even if you could pay them." "Why not?" "Because they are fools who think women should stay in the kitchen and let men do the real work. You will find Moab is not short on that kind of thinking." Margaret paused, then added, "But there might be someone. A man came through town last week, looking for work. Nobody would hire him because he had a reputation for trouble. Got into a fight with a ranch foreman up in Wyoming, near got himself killed. He has been camping down by the river doing odd jobs for food." "What kind of trouble?" Willa asked carefully. "The kind where he does not back down when someone tries to cheat him or push him around. The foreman in question was shorting his men on wages and working them near to death. This fellow called him out on it, and they came to blows. He won the fight, but the foreman had the rancher's ear. He got blacklisted, and word travels fast in cattle country." "What is his name?" "Tucker Parish. He is young, maybe 25 or 26, but he knows his business. He grew up on a ranch in Texas before the war ruined his family. Been working cattle ever since." Willa felt a small spark of hope. "Where by the river? Follow the main road south out of town about a mile. You will see his camp on the west bank near the cottonwoods. Thank you, Mrs. Sullivan. Call me Margaret and Miss Reynolds. Do not let the fools in this town tell you what you can and cannot do. If you have got half your father's stubbornness, you might just surprise them." Willa found Tucker Parish exactly where Margaret said he would be. His camp was neat and minimal. Just a bedroll under a canvas lean-to, a small fire ring, and his horse picketed nearby in good grass. The horse was a fine-looking bay gelding, well cared for despite its owner's circumstances. The man himself was sitting on a log by the cold fire, mending a bridle with an awl and leather cord. He looked up as Willa approached on her mare, and she got her first good look at him. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that needed cutting and several days' worth of stubble on his jaw. His clothes were worn but clean. His eyes were startling, a light gray that seemed almost silver in the afternoon sun, and they assessed her with intelligence and caution. "Help you with something?" he asked, setting down the bridle but not standing up. There was no hostility in his voice but no warmth either, just wariness. "My name is Willa Reynolds. I own a ranch 15 miles north of here. I am looking to hire a ranch hand." Tucker studied her for a long moment. You are Joshua's daughter, heard he passed. I am sorry for your loss. You knew my father, met him once or twice in town. He seemed a decent man. Tucker picked up the bridle again, working the leather through the buckle. I appreciate the offer, Miss Reynolds, but you should know that nobody in Moab will hire me. I have a reputation for being difficult. Margaret Sullivan told me about Wyoming. She said the foreman was cheating his men. He was. I told him so. We fought. I won. He had friends. End of story. Do you know cattle? For the first time, something like amusement flickered in those gray eyes. Yes, madam, I know cattle. Been working them since I was 8 years old. I can rope, brand, doctor sick animals, fix fence, break horses, and just about anything else that needs doing on a ranch. Can you help me save a failing ranch with 47 head of cattle, 3 months to pay off a $3,000 debt, and no money for wages until we sell beef? Tucker set down the bridle and finally stood up. He was even taller than she had thought, at least 6 feet, and he moved with the easy grace of someone who had spent his life working hard physical jobs. That is a tall order, Miss Reynolds. I know. But I am not going to give up without trying, and I cannot do it alone. You understand that folks around here are going to talk if you hire a single man to work your ranch. A young single man working for a young single woman living on the same property. They will say things. Let them talk. I need help, and you need work. Unless you are the kind of man who gives them something real to talk about. Tucker shook his head slowly, and now there was definitely a hint of a smile. No, madam, I am not that kind of man. Then do we have a deal? I can feed you and you can sleep in the bunkhouse. It is not much, but it is better than camping by the river. Once we sell cattle and I can pay off some of the debt, I will pay you fair wages. Why are you willing to take a chance on me when nobody else will? Willa met his eyes directly. Because Margaret Sullivan vouched for you, and because I do not have any other options. But mostly because I do not think standing up to a man who cheats his workers is trouble. I think it is character. Tucker was quiet for a moment, then nodded. All right, Miss Reynolds. You have got yourself a ranch hand. When do we start? Right now, if you can be ready. He was packed and mounted within 10 minutes. They rode north together through the afternoon heat, and Willa felt as though she could breathe properly for the first time in days. She was not alone anymore. Maybe, just maybe, she had a chance. When they reached the ranch, Tucker spent an hour looking around, saying little but missing nothing. He checked the barn, the fences, the water sources, and rode out to look at the cattle in the near pasture. When he came back, his expression was serious but not hopeless. It is not as bad as it could be, he said, dismounting near the barn. The cattle you have got are healthy, the grass is decent, and you have got water. The infrastructure needs work, but it is all fixable. But can we make enough money in 3 months? Tucker pulled off his hat and ran a hand through his hair, thinking. Maybe. Your father's herd was scattered when things got bad. There could be more cattle out in the far pastures, unbranded calves that have been missed. If we can round up everything and get a proper count, we might have more assets than you think. And if we do not, then we need to make what we have worth more. There is a cattle buyer in Grand Junction who pays premium prices if you can deliver healthy, well-managed beef on a schedule. He supplies the mining camps up in the Colorado mountains. It is a hard drive, about 80 miles through rough country, but the profit margin is better. Can 2 people drive cattle that far? Tucker met her eyes. I have done harder things with less help. But I am not going to lie to you, Miss Reynolds. It is going to be brutal work. Long days, short nights, everything that can go wrong probably will, and at the end of it we might still fail. But we might succeed. We might. Then let us get started. They fell into a routine over the next few days. Tucker slept in the bunkhouse, which was cleaner than he had expected, with a good stove and 4 bunks. Willa cooked meals in the ranch house kitchen, and they ate together on the porch in the evening, going over plans for the next day. Tucker was respectful, professional, and astonishingly knowledgeable about every aspect of ranch work. He was also, Willa could not help but notice, quite handsome when he shaved and cleaned up. She scolded herself for that thought. This was business. She needed a ranch hand, not romantic complications. But she found herself looking forward to their evening conversations, the way he listened when she talked about her life in St. Louis, the rare smile that transformed his usually serious face. Tucker felt it too, though he tried not to. Willa Reynolds was beautiful, with auburn hair that caught fire in the sunset and green eyes that sparkled with determination and intelligence. But more than her looks, he admired her courage. She had walked into an impossible situation and refused to be defeated. She worked as hard as any man he had known, learning to rope and ride better, fixing fences until her hands blistered, never complaining. On the 8th day, they rode out to the far eastern section of the ranch, an area that butted up against public land and stretched into a maze of red rock canyons. Tucker had seen tracks suggesting cattle had wandered up into this country, and he wanted to check it out. They found the cattle late in the afternoon, a group of about 30 head including several unbranded calves. The animals were scattered through a wide canyon with good grass and a spring-fed pool. Getting them out would take patience and skill. "We will camp here tonight and start pushing them back toward the ranch in the morning," Tucker said, dismounting near the spring. "It will take us 2 days to move them back, going slow so we do not lose any." Willa had never camped in the open before, and she felt a flutter of nervousness as Tucker set up a simple camp. He was efficient and methodical, gathering wood for a fire, picketing the horses where they could graze, laying out the bedrolls at a respectful distance from each other. They had brought supplies for a few days, and he cooked a simple meal of beans and bacon that tasted better than it had any right to. As darkness fell and the stars came out in impossible numbers, they sat by the fire and talked. Tucker told her about growing up in Texas, how his family had lost everything after the war, how his father had died trying to hold onto land that the bank took anyway. It was the most personal information he had shared, and Willa understood that he was telling her this for a reason, letting her know that he understood what she was fighting for. "I will not let that happen to you if I can help it," he said quietly, staring into the fire. "What the banks and the big ranchers do, taking everything from people who work themselves to death, it is not right. Maybe we cannot change the system, but we can fight this one battle." "Why does it matter to you?" Willa asked. "You could find work anywhere. Why risk everything on a losing proposition?" Tucker looked at her then, and in the firelight his eyes were intense. "Because you believed in me when nobody else would. Because you are not afraid to fight for what is yours, and because I think you are the bravest person I have ever met." The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither of them was quite ready to name. Then Tucker cleared his throat and stood up. "We should get some sleep. Early start tomorrow." They spent the next 2 days slowly driving the cattle back toward the ranch, and it was some of the hardest work Willa had ever done. The animals were half wild from months of living on their own, and they scattered at every opportunity. Tucker taught her how to read the herd, how to position herself to guide their movement, how to be patient when everything in her wanted to rush. By the time they got the cattle penned near the ranch, Willa was exhausted, sunburned, and sore in muscles she had not known she had. But they now had 78 head of cattle, including 15 unbranded calves. It was not wealth, but it was progress. "We need to brand those calves before we do anything else," Tucker said, "and we should check the rest of the range. There could be more scattered groups." "How long will that take?" at least another week to cover the whole property. Then we need to decide on our strategy. Do we sell now and hope we get enough to cover the debt? Or do we risk the drive to Grand Junction for better prices? That night, Willa sat at her father's desk with the ledgers and did the mathematics over and over, trying to make the numbers work. If they sold the cattle at local prices, they would make maybe $2,000. It was not enough. Even if they found more cattle, it would not be enough unless prices were unusually good. The drive to Grand Junction was a gamble. They would need to leave at least 70 head to maintain a breeding herd. They could take the rest, maybe 100 head if they found more cattle in the remaining sections of the range. The prices in Grand Junction were nearly double what they could get locally. But the drive was dangerous, and if they lost too many cattle along the way, or if prices had dropped by the time they arrived, they could end up with even less than if they had sold locally. Tucker found her there near midnight, still staring at the numbers by lamplight. He had been doing a final check on the horses and saw the light burning in the house. "You are going to wear yourself out," he said from the doorway. "I cannot make it work," Willa said, hearing the desperation in her own voice. "No matter how I calculate it, we are short. We need at least $3,000, and I cannot see a way to get there." Tucker came into the room and looked over her shoulder at the ledgers. He was standing close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, smell the familiar scent of leather and sage and wood smoke that had come to mean safety and partnership. "We take the gamble," he said quietly. "We round up every animal we can find, we take the drive to Grand Junction, and we make it work. It is risky, but playing it safe is just a slower way to lose. What if we fail? Then we fail fighting. But Willa, I do not think we are going to fail. I have been on a lot of ranches, worked for a lot of people. I have never seen anyone work as hard as you do or learn as fast. If anyone can pull off a miracle, it is you." She turned in her chair to look up at him, and something in his expression made her breath catch. The professional distance that had existed between them was dissolving, replaced by something deeper and more complicated. "Tucker, I do not know what I would have done without you. You would have found a way. You are that kind of person." He paused, then added softly, "But I am glad you did not have to." The moment hung between them, full of possibility and longing. Then Tucker stepped back, breaking the spell. "Get some rest. We have a lot of work ahead of us." Over the next 2 weeks, they covered every inch of the ranch, finding cattle in draws and canyons and hidden valleys. By the end of the search, they had a total of 137 head of cattle, including 28 unbranded calves. It was more than Willa had dared to hope for. They spent a brutal day branding, with Tucker managing the ropes and hot irons while Willa learned to help hold the calves. The work was hot, dusty, and demanding, but by sunset, every animal bore the Reynolds brand, a simple R in a circle. "We have got a herd," Tucker said, coiling his rope as the last calf scrambled back to its mother. "Now we need to decide how many we take to Grand Junction and how many we leave." They settled on taking 100 head, leaving 37 as breeding stock. It was aggressive, betting almost everything on the drive, but it was the only way to make enough money to pay off the debt and have something left to rebuild. Tucker sent a telegram to the buyer in Grand Junction, arranging for delivery in 3 weeks. The response came back quickly. The buyer would take all the cattle they could deliver at $3 a head above the local rate. If they got all 100 animals there alive and healthy, they would make $3,800. Enough to pay off the debt, pay Tucker the wages he was owed, and have a small cushion for the winter. The night before they were scheduled to leave, Willa could not sleep. She lay in bed listening to the house creak around her, thinking about everything that could go wrong. Cattle could scatter in the night. They could be hit by an early storm. They could lose animals to injury or predators. They could arrive in Grand Junction only to find that prices had dropped or the buyer had changed his mind. She finally gave up on sleep and went downstairs, intending to make coffee. She found Tucker already in the kitchen, sitting at the table in lamplight. "Could not sleep either," he asked. "Too much to worry about." "Come sit down, I will make coffee." They sat together in the quiet kitchen, drinking bitter coffee and not talking much, but finding comfort in the shared silence. Finally, Tucker said, "Willa, I need to tell you something before we leave." She looked at him, her heart suddenly beating faster. "What is it?" "If something happens to me on this drive, if I get hurt or worse, I want you to know that this has been the best job I have ever had. Not because of the work, though I love the work, but because of you. You gave me a chance when nobody else would, and you treated me like a partner, not just hired help. That matters more than you know." "Tucker, do not talk like that. Nothing is going to happen to you. You cannot know that. This is dangerous country and things happen. I just wanted you to know." He paused, then added quietly, "And I wanted you to know that somewhere along the way I stopped thinking of this as just a job. I care about you, Willa, more than I should. More than is probably smart given the circumstances." Willa felt her breath catch. "Tucker, you do not have to say anything. I know this is complicated. You are my employer and we have got 3 months to save your ranch. I am not asking for anything. I just needed you to know. I care about you too," Willa said softly. "I have been trying not to, trying to keep things professional, but I do. When I think about what comes after we save the ranch, assuming we do, I find myself hoping that you will stay. Not as an employee, but as a partner. A real partner." Tucker reached across the table and took her hand, his rough fingers gentle as they intertwined with hers. "I would like that. I would like that very much." They sat like that for a long moment, holding hands in the lamplight, not needing words. Then Tucker stood, still holding her hand, and drew her to her feet. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch careful and questioning, giving her every chance to pull away. Willa rose on her toes and kissed him instead. It was a soft kiss, sweet and tentative, but it carried the weight of everything they had been holding back for weeks. When they broke apart, Tucker rested his forehead against hers. "We should probably get some rest," he said, his voice rough. "Big day tomorrow." "Probably," Willa agreed, but neither of them moved. They kissed again, longer this time, and Willa felt as though she were falling and flying at the same time. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. "Willa Reynolds, you are going to be the death of me," Tucker said, but he was smiling. "Get some rest, Tucker Parish. We have cattle to drive." They left at dawn, pushing the herd north and east toward the Colorado border. The first few days were the hardest, getting the cattle used to moving together, establishing the routine. They rose before sunrise and worked until after dark, taking turns sleeping while the other watched the herd. It was exhausting work, but they fell into a rhythm, learning to anticipate each other's movements, working as a seamless team. The landscape was spectacular and unforgiving in equal measure. All red rock cliffs and sagebrush flats, with the distant mountains promising cooler weather and better grass. They crossed the Colorado River on the 4th day, a tense operation that had Tucker riding back and forth through the water, keeping the cattle moving forward while Willa worked the flanks. On the 6th day, they ran into trouble. A group of riders appeared on the ridgeline ahead, 4 men on good horses, watching the herd. Tucker's hand moved instinctively toward the rifle in his saddle scabbard. "Stay calm," he said to Willa. "Let me do the talking." The men rode down to meet them, spreading out in a way that made it clear this was not a friendly visit. The leader was a thick-shouldered man with a black beard and cold eyes. "That is a nice herd you have got there," he said, his voice carrying false friendliness. "Where are you taking them?" "Grand Junction," Tucker said evenly. "We have got a buyer waiting." "Is that so?" "Well, the thing is, we have been having trouble with rustlers in this area. We are part of a cattlemen's association, and we have got the authority to check brands, make sure everything is legal." "The brands are all legal. This is the Reynolds Ranch herd, and we have got bills of sale for every animal." The bearded man looked past Tucker to Willa. "You are Reynolds. I heard Joshua's daughter was trying to run his ranch. That is a laugh. Woman running cattle." "I am running cattle just fine," Willa said, keeping her voice steady despite her anger. "And we are on public land with legal livestock. We have got no business with you. Maybe we should check those brands anyway, just to be sure." Tucker moved his horse forward slightly, positioning himself between the men and Willa. "We have got a schedule to keep. Our brands are registered in Moab. If you have got questions, you can check with the land office." The bearded man's expression hardened. "I do not like your tone, friend." "I am not your friend, and we are moving on. You boys have a nice day." For a moment, violence hung in the air like the smell of ozone before a lightning strike. Then one of the other men spoke up, his voice carrying a note of warning. "That is Tucker Parish. He is the one who beat Sam Morrison near to death up in Wyoming." The bearded man's eyes narrowed, reassessing. "That true? Morrison was alive when I left him," Tucker said. "Just educated on the idea of paying his men fair wages. Now we are moving on. You can try to stop us, but I promise you it will not go the way you think." There was another long moment of tension, then the bearded man laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. "All right, Parish, take your cattle, but you tell that girl she is fighting a losing battle. This is no country for women trying to do man's work." They rode away, and Tucker kept watching them until they disappeared over the ridge. His jaw was tight with anger. "Are you all right?" Willa asked. "I am fine, but we need to keep a sharp watch from here on out." Those men were thinking about causing trouble. Who were they? Small-time operators who like to throw their weight around. The kind who think because they can push people around they should. Do not let them get in your head, Willa. You are proving them all wrong just by being here, by doing this. They pushed on, but the encounter had shaken Willa more than she wanted to admit. Not because she was afraid, but because it reminded her how many people were waiting for her to fail, how much satisfaction they would take from seeing her lose the ranch. That night, camped in a sheltered draw with the cattle settled for the night, Tucker sat beside her by the fire and put his arm around her shoulders. "You are doing amazing," he said quietly. "Do not let anyone tell you different." Willa leaned into him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "I keep thinking about what happens if we fail, if all this work, all this risk is for nothing. Then we figure out what comes next, together." Tucker tilted her chin up so she was looking at him. "Willa, whatever happens, I am not going anywhere. Whether you have got a ranch or not, whether you have got money or not, I am with you. If that is what you want." "That is what I want," Willa said and kissed him. They made love for the first time that night, under a blanket of stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch. Tucker was gentle and patient, and Willa felt as though she were discovering a part of herself she had not known existed. Afterward, they lay tangled together in Tucker's bedroll, listening to the cattle settling for the night and the distant yipping of coyotes. "I love you," Tucker said quietly. "I know this is fast, and I know we have got a lot to figure out, but I love you, Willa Reynolds." "I love you too," Willa said, and felt the truth of it settle into her bones. "I think I have loved you since you packed up your camp in 10 minutes and came to help a stranger save a failing ranch." They reached Grand Junction on the 14th day, trail worn and exhausted, but with 97 head of cattle. having lost only 3 animals to injury along the way. The buyer was a shrewd-eyed man named Peterson who walked through the herd, checking each animal carefully before nodding his approval. "You have done good work," he said. "These are healthy animals, well managed. I will give you the price we agreed on. $3,880 for 97 head at $40 each." It was more money than Willa had ever seen in one place. Peterson paid in a mix of cash and a bank draft, and Willa stood holding the leather pouch with her hands shaking slightly, hardly able to believe it was real. "You all right?" Tucker asked, concerned. "We did it," Willa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tucker, we actually did it." They spent one night in Grand Junction, staying at a small hotel where the clerk looked at them with obvious disapproval when Tucker asked for 2 rooms. Willa was too tired and too happy to care what some hotel clerk thought. She took the longest bath of her life, washing away 2 weeks of trail dust, then fell into bed and slept for 12 hours straight. The next morning, they ate breakfast in a real restaurant, sitting across from each other at a table with a white cloth and actual china plates. Willa could not stop smiling. "What are you so happy about?" Tucker asked, though he was smiling too. "Everything. We saved the ranch. We proved everyone wrong. And I am sitting here having breakfast with the man I love who just helped me drive 100 head of cattle 80 miles through some of the roughest country in the West. When you put it that way, it does sound pretty good." They rode back to Moab at a leisurely pace, taking 5 days for a journey that had taken them 14 on the way out. When they reached the bank, Willa walked in with Tucker at her side and placed the leather pouch on Henderson's desk. "I am here to pay my father's debt in full," she said. Henderson's expression was almost comical as he counted out the money. When he was done, he wrote out a receipt for $3,247, officially clearing the mortgage. "Miss Reynolds, I must say I am surprised. I did not think you would be able to raise this kind of money." "A lot of people did not think I could do a lot of things," Willa said pleasantly. "Now, if you will excuse me, I have a ranch to run." They walked out of the bank together and Tucker let out a whoop of pure joy. "You did it." "Willa, you actually did it." "We did it," Willa corrected, and kissed him right there on the main street of Moab, not caring who saw. They stopped at the general store where Margaret Sullivan nearly cried with happiness at the news. "I knew you could do it," she said, hugging Willa. "I knew you had it in you." "I could not have done it without Tucker," Willa said. "Margaret, I need to ask you something. If Tucker and I were to get married, would you and your husband stand as witnesses?" Margaret's eyes went wide, then filled with tears. "Of course we would." "Oh, this is wonderful." Tucker, who had been examining a display of rope near the front of the store, turned around with a shocked expression. "Willa, did you just propose to me?" "I did." "Is that a problem?" Tucker crossed the store in 3 long strides and picked her up, spinning her around while she laughed. "No, madam, that is not a problem at all. Though I was planning to do it myself, I just wanted to wait until the right moment." "This is the right moment," Willa said. "Tucker Parish, will you marry me?" "Yes," Tucker said and kissed her. "Yes, absolutely yes." They were married 3 days later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Moab. Margaret and her husband James stood as witnesses, along with the minister and his wife. Willa wore a simple blue dress that Margaret helped her pick out from the store, and Tucker wore clean clothes and the only tie he owned. It was not fancy, but it was perfect. The minister pronounced them husband and wife, and Tucker kissed his bride with a tenderness that made Margaret cry happy tears. They spent their wedding night at the hotel in Moab, in a room with a real bed and clean sheets, and Willa thought she had never been happier in her entire life. The next morning they rode back to the ranch together, And this time when Willa looked at the weathered house and sagging fences, she saw not ruin but possibility. They had money to make repairs, buy more cattle, hire help if they needed it. But more than that, they had each other. "What do you want to do first?" Tucker asked as they stood in the ranch yard looking at their home. "Fix the house," Willa said, "and the barn. Then we need to repair the fences before winter, and we should buy some more breeding stock, build the herd back up. That is going to take years." "Good thing we have got years." Willa took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "Tucker, are you sure this is what you want, a wife and a ranch and years of hard work ahead of us?" "It is the only thing I want," Tucker said. "I have spent my whole life drifting from job to job, never having anything of my own, never having a real home. You gave me all of that. A home, a partnership, a future, and love. I never thought I would find love like this." "Neither did I," Willa admitted. "When I got off that train in Moab, I thought my life was over. Instead, it was just beginning." They spent the fall repairing the ranch, working from dawn until dusk every day. Tucker was good with his hands, and he rebuilt the sagging porch, fixed the roof, reinforced the barn, and repaired miles of fencing. Willa worked alongside him, learning skills she had never imagined she would need, becoming stronger and more confident with each passing day. They bought 20 head of young cows with the money they had left after paying the debt and Tucker's wages. It was a start toward rebuilding the herd. Tucker also bought a young bull from a rancher in Colorado, a good-tempered animal with strong bloodlines that would improve the quality of their cattle. Word spread about what Willa and Tucker had accomplished, and the reactions were mixed. Some people in town were impressed, even admiring. Others, especially the men who had predicted Willa's failure, were resentful and dismissive. They claimed Tucker had done all the real work, that Willa had just been along for the ride. Margaret Sullivan set them straight whenever she heard such talk. "I saw them come into town after that drive," she would say firmly. "Both of them trail worn and exhausted, working as partners. Willa Reynolds is running that ranch as much as her husband is, and anyone who says different is a fool. Winter came, and it was a hard one. They lost 2 cattle to cold and sickness despite their best efforts, but the rest of the herd survived. Tucker taught Willa how to hunt, and they kept the ranch supplied with venison and rabbit. They spent the long winter evenings by the fire, making plans for the spring, reading aloud to each other from the small collection of books Willa had brought from St. Louis, talking about everything and nothing. On Christmas Eve, they sat together watching snow fall outside the window, and Willa told Tucker she was pregnant. His face went through a series of expressions: shock, joy, wonder, before settling on pure happiness. "Are you sure?" "I am sure. The baby should come in July." Tucker pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully as though she might break. "This is the best Christmas present I have ever received." "I am a little scared," Willa admitted. "What if I am not a good mother? What if something goes wrong? You are going to be an amazing mother." "And nothing is going to go wrong. We are going to figure it out together, just like we have figured out everything else." Spring came, and with it new life. The cattle produced 23 calves, including 2 sets of twins. Tucker planted a vegetable garden near the house, and Willa tended it as her pregnancy progressed. Margaret came out to the ranch once a week, bringing supplies and checking on Willa, offering advice and friendship. As summer approached, Willa grew slower and more tired, but she kept working as much as she could. Tucker tried to get her to rest more, but she was too stubborn to stay idle for long. "The work does not stop just because I am having a baby," she would say. "The work will still be there tomorrow," Tucker would counter. "You need to take care of yourself and our child." They compromised, with Willa handling lighter tasks while Tucker took on the heavy labor. He hired a young man from town named Illy to help with the summer work, a shy 17-year-old who was eager to learn and did not care that his employer was a woman. On July 15th, on one of the hottest days of the summer, Willa went into labor. Tucker rode into town at a gallop, fetched the midwife, and then spent the next 12 hours pacing the porch while Willa labored inside with Margaret and the midwife attending her. When he finally heard the baby cry, Tucker nearly broke down the door getting inside. Willa was propped up in bed, exhausted and sweaty but smiling, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a clean blanket. "Meet your son," she said softly. Tucker approached the bed on shaking legs and looked down at the tiny, red-faced baby. His son. He had a son. The enormity of it hit him like a physical blow. "He is perfect," Tucker said, his voice rough with emotion. "You are perfect. Willa, I do not have words for what I am feeling right now." "I know," Willa said, smiling up at him. "I love you, Tucker Parish. I love you too, both of you." They named the baby James Tucker Parish, after Margaret's husband and his father. Little James was a healthy baby with a good set of lungs and his father's gray eyes. Tucker was besotted from the first moment, constantly finding excuses to hold his son, check on him, make sure he was breathing. "He is not going to disappear if you stop watching him for 5 minutes, Willa teased. "I just want to make sure he is all right." "He is more than all right. He has got his father watching over him." The first year of James's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and endless work. But it was also filled with moments of perfect joy. James's first smile, his first laugh, his first steps. The ranch continued to prosper. They sold cattle in the spring, made a good profit, and put the money back into improvements. Tucker built a new chicken coop, and Willa started keeping hens for eggs. They added more fencing, bought more cattle, slowly building up the herd. By the time James was 2, the Reynolds Ranch was one of the most successful small operations in the area. Willa had proven beyond any doubt that a woman could run cattle, and she had done it with style and skill. The men who had doubted her were forced to acknowledge her success, though some did so grudgingly. One afternoon, Tucker came in from checking the herd to find Willa sitting at the kitchen table with the ledgers, a slight frown on her face. "What is wrong?" he asked. "Nothing is wrong. I am just thinking about the future. James is going to need brothers and sisters, and we need to plan for expansion. I think we should buy the Anderson property." "The Anderson property? That is another 500 acres, and it borders our northern fence line. That would more than double the size of the ranch." "Exactly. Tom Anderson wants to retire and move to California to live with his daughter. He has been running cattle on that land for 20 years, and it is good grazing. If we can make a deal with him, we would have room to expand the herd significantly." Tucker sat down across from her, studying his wife with admiration. She had come so far from the uncertain young woman who had climbed down from the wagon that first day, overwhelmed by the task ahead of her. Now she was thinking about expansion, planning for the future, making decisions with confidence and wisdom. "How much is he asking?" $2,000. "We have got 1,500 saved. If we sell cattle this fall and have a good season, we could make up the difference. Then let us do it." "I think it is a smart move." They made an offer on the Anderson property and closed the deal in October of 1886. The combined ranch was now nearly 1,200 acres, with over 150 head of cattle. They hired Illy permanently, and he moved into the bunkhouse. A year later, they hired another hand, an older man named Charlie who had worked cattle his whole life and did not care who signed his paychecks as long as they paid on time. Willa got pregnant again in the winter of 1887, and their daughter Emma was born that September. She had Willa's auburn hair and Tucker's gray eyes, and she was as stubborn as both her parents combined. James adored his baby sister, and Tucker joked that they were going to have their hands full when Emma got older. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. They built a new barn, added a forge so Tucker could do basic blacksmithing work, and planted an orchard of apple and peach trees that would bear fruit in a few years. Willa started breeding horses as well as cattle, buying a good mare and a young stallion with excellent conformation. Life was not without challenges. They had dry years and wet years, good markets and bad markets, animals that got sick and fences that needed constant repair. But they faced every challenge together, as partners in every sense of the word. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Tucker surprised Willa with a gift. It was a sign, beautifully carved and painted, that read Reynolds Parish Ranch, ESD. 1883, W. Reynolds Parish and T. Parish Proprietors. "I had it made in Grand Junction," Tucker said as they hung it on the gate at the entrance to the property. "I wanted everyone who comes here to know that this is your ranch as much as it is mine, that we built this together." Willa looked at the sign, at her name proudly displayed, and felt tears welling up. "It is perfect, thank you." "Thank you," Tucker said, putting his arm around her, "for giving me a home, for giving me a family, for giving me a life I never dreamed I could have." They stood together looking at the sign, with James and Emma playing in the yard behind them, the ranch stretching out around them, solid and prosperous and real. Willa thought about that day 5 years ago when she had climbed down from the wagon, facing what looked like certain failure. She thought about how close she had come to losing everything, and she thought about the moment when a stranger with gray eyes and a reputation for trouble had agreed to take a chance on her, and how that single decision had changed both their lives forever. "What are you thinking about?" Tucker asked. "Just how lucky I am, how lucky we are." "I am the lucky one," Tucker said. "I was drifting before I met you, just moving from job to job with no real direction. You gave me a purpose. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Willa corrected, and kissed her husband while their children laughed and played in the summer sunshine. Over the next several years, the Reynolds Parish Ranch became one of the most respected operations in southeastern Utah. Willa's reputation spread, and she became known as a successful rancher who had proven that determination and skill mattered more than gender. Other women in the area sought her advice, and she was always generous with her time and knowledge. Tucker continued to be Willa's partner in every sense, working alongside her to build something that would last for generations. They had 2 more children, another son they named Daniel in 1890, and a daughter named Sarah in 1893. The house, which had once seemed so empty and broken, was filled with laughter and life. James grew into a strong, capable boy who loved working with the cattle. Emma was as wild as the desert wind, riding horses before she was 4 and fearless in everything she tried. Daniel was quiet and thoughtful, more interested in books than ranching, which was fine with Willa and Tucker. Sarah was still too young to show much personality beyond being generally happy and easy-going. They expanded the house, adding more bedrooms and a proper dining room. Tucker built Willa a study where she could manage the ranch business, with a big desk and shelves for her growing collection of books and ledgers. The ranch employed 5 permanent hands now, with additional help hired during busy seasons. On a warm evening in the spring of 1895, Willa and Tucker sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the red rocks in shades of orange and gold. The children were finally asleep after a long day of activity. The ranch was quiet except for the sounds of cattle lowing in the distance and the evening songs of birds settling in for the night. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Willa asked, leaning against Tucker's shoulder. "If you had not been camping by the river that day. If Margaret had not told me about you. All the time," Tucker admitted. "I think about how close I came to never meeting you, never having any of this. It terrifies me sometimes, how many small things had to go right for us to end up here. I was so scared that first year. I did not think we could possibly succeed. But you never gave up. That is what I love about you, Willa. You have never given up on anything in your life." "I had you," Willa said simply. "That made all the difference." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out one by one in the darkening sky. 12 years ago, Willa had arrived in Moab with nothing but debt and determination. Now she had a thriving ranch, a husband she loved more than she had thought possible, and 4 beautiful children. She had proven everyone wrong who said a woman could not run cattle. More than that, she had built a life that was rich and full and meaningful. "What are you thinking about?" Tucker asked, echoing the question he had asked so many times over the years. "Just that I am happy," Willa said. "Completely, absolutely happy." "Me too," Tucker said and kissed the top of her head. "Me too." The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges but also joy and growth. The children grew up working on the ranch, learning the skills they would need to carry on the family legacy. James, the eldest, proved to have a natural talent for managing livestock and took over more responsibility as he got older. Emma, true to her wild nature, became an expert horsewoman and helped her mother develop the horse breeding program into a significant source of income. Daniel, as expected, was more interested in books than cattle, but he had a head for numbers that made him invaluable in managing the ranch's business affairs. Even as a teenager, he could look at the ledgers and spot opportunities or potential problems that others might miss. Sarah, the youngest, seemed to have inherited the best qualities of both her parents: Willa's determination and intelligence, Tucker's steady patience and skill with animals. The Reynolds Parish Ranch became a model for successful ranching in Utah. Other ranchers, some grudgingly and others admiringly, would point to it as an example of what could be accomplished with hard work and smart management. The fact that it was run by a woman, or rather by a husband and wife partnership that treated each other as true equals, became less remarkable as the years passed, and the results spoke for themselves. Willa was asked to speak at Cattlemen's Association meetings. Her opinion sought on matters of breeding, range management, and marketing. The men who had once dismissed her now listened when she talked, though there were still a few stubborn holdouts who insisted that Tucker deserved all the credit. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Tucker and Willa took a rare trip away from the ranch, leaving the children in the care of Margaret Sullivan and the ranch hands. They traveled to Salt Lake City, stayed in a fancy hotel, and spent 3 days just being a couple again, without the constant demands of ranch life and parenthood. On their last evening in the city, they dressed up for dinner at the hotel restaurant. Willa in a beautiful green dress that Tucker had bought for her as an anniversary present. Tucker in a new suit that made him look almost uncomfortable but devastatingly handsome. "I feel like I should be working," Willa said, smoothing the silk of her dress. "It feels wrong to be sitting here doing nothing." "We are not doing nothing. We are celebrating 10 years of marriage and everything we have built together," Tucker said, taking her hand across the table. "When was the last time we just sat and talked without someone interrupting us to ask where something is or tell us that a fence is down or a cow is having trouble calving?" "I honestly cannot remember," Willa admitted with a laugh. "Exactly. So tonight, we are just Willa and Tucker, not ranchers or parents. Just us." They talked late into the night about their dreams for the future, their hopes for their children, their memories of the early days when everything was uncertain and terrifying. They laughed about the mistakes they had made, the times they had argued over the best way to do something, the moments of pure panic when they thought they might lose everything. "You have any regrets?" Willa asked as they walked back to their room through the quiet hotel corridors. Tucker stopped and turned to face her, his hands on her shoulders. "Not a single one. Every choice I have made since the day I met you has led to the best life I could imagine. I love you more now than I did the day we got married, which I did not think was possible. You are my partner, my best friend, the love of my life. How could I have any regrets?" Willa felt tears welling up. "I love you so much, Tucker Parish. Thank you for taking a chance on a desperate woman with a failing ranch and more debt than sense. Thank you for seeing past a down on his luck cowboy with a reputation for trouble, and giving him a reason to be better than he thought he could be." They made love that night with the tenderness and passion of people who had grown together over years, who knew each other's bodies and hearts completely. It was different from their first time under the stars during the cattle drive, more mature and comfortable, but no less intense. When they returned to the ranch 3 days later, they were refreshed and ready to dive back into the work. The children mobbed them at the door, all talking at once about everything that had happened while they were gone. Emma's favorite horse had foaled a beautiful colt. Daniel had finished reading an entire book about animal husbandry and had ideas for improving their breeding program. Sarah had baked cookies with Margaret, and they had only burned one batch. James had handled a problem with the fence line on the eastern boundary and was clearly proud of having managed it on his own. "See," Tucker said that night as they finally collapsed into bed, exhausted but happy. "We are barely gone 3 days, and the place almost runs itself." "Almost," Willa agreed. "But I do not think I want to make a habit of leaving. As much as I enjoyed the trip, I missed being here. This is home." As the children grew older and took on more responsibility, Willa and Tucker found themselves with a bit more time to focus on each other and on long-term planning for the ranch. They built a new house for the ranch foreman, hired more permanent staff, and purchased additional land when opportunities arose. By 1900, the Reynolds Parish Ranch covered over 2,000 acres and ran more than 400 head of cattle, plus a thriving horse breeding operation that had gained a reputation for producing strong, intelligent animals perfect for ranch work. They had weathered droughts and harsh winters, low cattle prices and competition from larger outfits, but they had survived and prospered. James, now 17, was essentially running the day-to-day cattle operations under his parents' guidance. He had grown into a tall, serious young man with his father's steady competence and his mother's sharp mind for business. There was already talk that he would take over the ranch when Willa and Tucker were ready to step back, though neither of them was thinking about retirement anytime soon. Emma, 15, was courting a young man from a neighboring ranch, much to Tucker's consternation. "She is too young," he would grumble, even though he had been only 25 when he married Willa, who had been 22. "She is not marrying him tomorrow," Willa would remind him patiently. "She is just spending time with him. Let her enjoy being young." Daniel, at 10, was already talking about going to university to study agriculture and animal science. Tucker was immensely proud, even though it meant his son would leave the ranch for a few years. "He will come back with knowledge that will make this ranch even better," Tucker said. "That is worth the temporary separation." Sarah, at 7, was everyone's darling, sweet-natured, but with a stubborn streak that emerged when she felt strongly about something. She had declared that when she grew up, she was going to be a rancher like her mother, and no one doubted she would do exactly that. On a crisp October morning in 1900, Willa woke early and slipped out of bed without waking Tucker. She made coffee and took it out to the porch, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the chill. The sun was just beginning to paint the eastern sky with pink and gold. She heard the door open behind her, and Tucker emerged, still pulling on his shirt. He sat down beside her, and she handed him her coffee cup, which he accepted gratefully. "You are up early," he said. "I could not sleep. I was thinking." "About what?" "About how far we have come. Tucker, do you realize it has been 17 years since I got off that train in Moab? 17 years since I stood in this yard and wondered if I had made a terrible mistake." "Best mistake you ever made," Tucker said with a smile. "Best decision," Willa corrected. "It stopped being a mistake the moment you agreed to help me." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the ranch wake up around them. Smoke rose from the bunkhouse chimney as the hands started their day. Cattle moved slowly across the distant pastures. A rooster crowed from the chicken coop. All the sounds of a working ranch, their ranch, the life they had built together from nothing but determination and love. "What do you want to do with the next 17 years?" Tucker asked. "Watch our children grow up and have families of their own. Keep building this ranch. Grow old with you. Maybe travel a little bit more, see some of the country beyond Utah." "That sounds perfect to me," Tucker said, "though I might add one thing." "What is that?" "More mornings like this. Just you and me and coffee and watching the sun come up over land that we worked for, fought for, built into something worth having." "I think we can arrange that," Willa said, and leaned her head on his shoulder. The years continued their steady march forward. James got married in 1903 to a sensible young woman named Catherine, and they built a house on the northern section of the ranch property. A year later, they made Willa and Tucker grandparents for the first time with the birth of a boy they named Joshua, after Willa's father. Emma married her young man, Robert, in 1905, and they started their own small ranch with help from Willa and Tucker. Daniel left for university in Salt Lake City in 1906, promising to come home for holidays and summers. Sarah grew into a capable young woman who seemed determined to learn every aspect of ranch management from her parents. Tucker's hair went gray at the temples, and he developed the weathered look of a man who had spent his life working outdoors. Willa's auburn hair showed streaks of silver, and she had laugh lines around her eyes from years of smiling. They moved a bit slower than they once had, but they were still strong and capable, still working the ranch alongside their children and grandchildren. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1903, the entire family gathered for a celebration. Margaret and James Sullivan came from town, along with several other friends they had made over the years. The house was full of laughter and good food, children running through the rooms, adults catching up on news and gossip. As the evening drew to a close and people began heading home, Willa and Tucker stood in the yard waving goodbye, surrounded by their children and grandchildren. When the last guest had disappeared down the road, Tucker pulled Willa close and kissed her. "20 years," he said. "Best 20 years of my life." "Mine too," Willa said. "Though I have to admit I never imagined it would turn out like this. When I hired you, I thought if we could just save the ranch, that would be enough. I did not know I was also finding my partner for life, the love of my life, the father of my children." "I was just looking for a job," Tucker said with a smile. "I did not know I was finding my home, my family, my entire future." "We were both lucky," Willa said. "No," Tucker corrected gently. "We both took chances on each other when it would have been easier to play it safe. We worked hard. We faced every challenge together. We built this life deliberately, with intention and love. That is not luck. That is something much better." As they walked back toward the house, arms around each other, Willa thought about the young woman who had stepped off the train in Moab all those years ago, scared and uncertain but determined to try. She thought about the cowboy who had been camping by the river, looking for work and a chance to prove himself. She thought about how easily they might have missed each other, how many things could have gone wrong, but they had not gone wrong. Against all odds, against everyone who said a woman could not run cattle, against a system that tried to crush small ranchers, against debt and drought and every other obstacle, they had succeeded. More than succeeded. They had thrived. They had proven everyone wrong, but more importantly, they had proven something to themselves, that courage and hard work and partnership could overcome anything. That love could be a foundation strong enough to build a life on. That two people, working together with respect and trust and commitment, could accomplish things that seemed impossible. The ranch that had been on the verge of foreclosure was now one of the most successful operations in southeastern Utah. The cattle operation had expanded to include horse breeding and a small but growing sheep operation that Sarah was managing. The land had been improved, fences maintained, buildings kept in good repair. The next generation was already learning the skills they would need to carry on the legacy. But more than the material success, Willa was proud of what they had built as a family. Their children had grown up seeing their parents work as equal partners, treating each other with respect and love. They had learned that gender did not determine capability, that a woman could be just as skilled at ranching as any man, that a man could be gentle and loving while still being strong. The years continued to pass, bringing more grandchildren, more successes and occasional setbacks, more memories to add to the collection they had been building since that first day when Tucker had packed up his camp and ridden north to help a stranger save her ranch. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Tucker gave Willa a journal, beautifully bound in leather. "I want you to write our story," he said. "For the grandchildren and for their grandchildren after them. I want them to know where they came from, what you overcame, what we built together." Willa had never considered herself a writer, but she started that very night, sitting at her desk in the study Tucker had built for her all those years ago. She wrote about getting off the train in Moab, about the failing ranch and the impossible debt. She wrote about meeting Tucker, about the cattle drive to Grand Junction, about falling in love under a blanket of stars. She wrote about the challenges they had faced and overcome, about building a family and a legacy. She wrote about proving that a woman could run cattle just as well as any man, as long as she had the courage to try and a partner who believed in her. When she finished, months later, she showed it to Tucker. He read it slowly, tears streaming down his weathered face. "This is beautiful," he said. "This is our life, everything we fought for and built and loved. Thank you for capturing it." "Thank you for living it with me," Willa said. "I could not have done any of it without you." "We did it together," Tucker said, which had become something of a motto for them over the years. "Everything we have, we built together." Tucker and Willa continued working the ranch well into their 50s, though they gradually handed over more responsibility to James and Sarah, who had proven themselves more than capable of managing the operation. Emma and her husband's ranch was also thriving, and Daniel had returned from university with advanced knowledge of animal breeding and range management that he applied to improve the family operations. The Reynolds Parish Ranch had become a dynasty, known throughout Utah and beyond as a model of successful ranching and family legacy. But what Willa was most proud of was not the size of the operation or the money they had made. It was the fact that they had built it on a foundation of love, respect, and partnership. On a warm summer evening in 1913, 30 years after Willa had first arrived in Moab, she and Tucker sat on the porch watching their grandchildren play in the yard. James and Catherine's children were there, along with Emma and Robert's kids and Sarah's 2 daughters. The house rang with laughter and the sounds of family. "We did all right," Tucker said quietly, taking Willa's hand. "We did better than all right," Willa said. "We built something that will last for generations. But more than that, we loved each other well. We were partners in the truest sense. We faced everything together." "What was the secret?" Tucker asked, though he was smiling. "How did we make it work when so many things could have gone wrong?" Willa thought about it, watching the sunset paint the red rocks in colors that still took her breath away after all these years. "We believed in each other," she said finally. "Even when nobody else did. You believed I could run this ranch, and I believed you were more than your reputation. We built on that foundation of faith in each other, and we never stopped building. And we loved each other," Tucker added. "Through good times and bad, through success and setbacks, through raising children and building a business and everything else life threw at us. We never stopped loving each other." "Never," Willa agreed, squeezing his hand. "And we never will." They sat together as the stars came out one by one, listening to their grandchildren laugh, surrounded by the legacy they had built from nothing but courage and determination and love. 30 years ago, everyone had said a woman could not run cattle. But Willa Reynolds Parish had proven them wrong, with Tucker Parish at her side as her partner, her love, and her greatest supporter. They had built a ranch, raised a family, and created a legacy that would continue for generations. But more than any of that, they had built a life together based on mutual respect, true partnership, and a love that had only grown deeper with each passing year. As Willa leaned against Tucker's shoulder, watching the moon rise over the land they had fought so hard to keep, she knew with absolute certainty that she would not change a single thing about the journey that had brought them here. Every challenge, every setback, every moment of doubt had been worth it for this. A life filled with love, family, purpose, and the satisfaction of knowing they had proven everyone wrong while building something beautiful and lasting. "I love you," Tucker said softly, as he had said thousands of times over the past 30 years. "I love you too," Willa replied, as she would continue to say for all the years they had left together. Always and forever. And in that moment, sitting on the porch of the ranch they had saved and built into something magnificent, surrounded by family and the land they loved, Willa Reynolds Parish knew that she had everything she had ever wanted and more than she had ever dared to dream.